Seoul, 2:47 a.m. The rain hammered against bulletproof glass 30 floors above the city. Ryoo Ho-Seok, known only as the architect in Korea's criminal underworld, sat in absolute silence. For 15 years, he had controlled everything, every debt, every deal, every death. His empire was built on a simple principle: information was power, and secrets were currency. But on this particular night, his new housemaid stood frozen in the doorway of his private study. In her trembling hands, a silk handkerchief, monogrammed, expensive, stained with blood that was 7 years old. She wasn't supposed to be in that room. She wasn't supposed to find it. And she definitely wasn't supposed to still be standing there, meeting his eyes, when any reasonable person would have already run. Quincy had been invisible for 23 days. Another face in the staff rotation. Another person he paid to exist in the margins of his carefully constructed world. But now, as Ho-Seok watched her through the amber reflection in his glass, something fundamental shifted. She knew something, and the most dangerous man in Seoul suddenly realized he was no longer the only one holding cards. What happened next would unravel everything he'd spent a lifetime building, not through violence, not through betrayal, but through a truth neither of them saw coming. This is the story of how a woman the world refused to see became the only person a powerful man couldn't look away from. And how a blood-stained piece of silk changed everything. Stay with me to witness the moment he breaks every rule he's ever made. The penthouse occupied the entire 42nd floor of Seoul's most exclusive residential tower. Market value, $32 million. Security clearance, higher than most government buildings. Ryoo Ho-Seok purchased it in cash in 2018. No mortgage, no paper trail, just a wire transfer from an account in Singapore that didn't officially exist. To Seoul's elite, he was a legitimate real estate developer. To those who actually mattered, he was the architect, the man who structured every major organized crime operation in South Korea for the past decade. He didn't get his hands dirty. He didn't need to. He simply designed the systems, money laundering through art galleries, drug distribution masked as medical supply chains, protection networks embedded so deeply into legitimate businesses that investigators couldn't tell where legality ended and criminality began. And he did it all from this fortress. 14 security cameras, bulletproof windows, a panic room disguised as a wine cellar, staff vetted through a private intelligence firm that cost more than most people's annual salary. Nothing entered this space without his knowledge. Nothing left without his permission. Or so he believed. March 14, 2024, the staffing agency sent a replacement housekeeper. The previous one had lasted 6 weeks before requesting reassignment. The official reason, scheduling conflicts. The real reason, she couldn't handle the isolation. Working for Ryoo Ho-Seok meant existing in complete silence. No small talk, no eye contact, no questions. The new hire was listed as Quincy Morrison, age 28, American citizen on a student visa, studying international business at Korea University. Background check, clean, references, standard. On paper, she was unremarkable. She arrived at 6:00 a.m. sharp, as instructed, buzzed through 3 security checkpoints, met by the head of household staff, a stone-faced woman named Mrs. Kang who laid out the rules in rapid Korean, then slower English. Mr. Ryoo values discretion above everything. You will clean what you're assigned. You will not enter the East Wing under any circumstances. You will not speak unless directly addressed. You will not, under any condition, discuss what you see or hear in this residence. Violation of any rule results in immediate termination and legal consequences. Do you understand? Quincy nodded once, understood. Mrs. Kang studied her for a long moment, as if searching for weakness. Then she handed over a tablet with the day's assignments and walked away. Quincy stood alone in the pristine marble foyer, 42 floors above the city, surrounded by luxury that felt more like a tomb than a home. She pulled her hair back, checked the assignment list, and got to work. What nobody in that building knew, what wouldn't become clear for weeks, was that Quincy Morrison had a gift. She noticed things. Everything. By day 3, she'd mapped the entire security camera network. Not because she was trying to avoid them, but because understanding sight lines was survival instinct from neighborhoods where being seen meant being targeted. By day 7, she'd identified the household patterns. Ho-Seok left for his office at 7:30 a.m., returned at 9:00 p.m., never deviated. By day 10, she realized something the previous staff had missed. He was alone. Completely, utterly alone. No friends visited, no family called. Even his business meetings happened off-site. The penthouse wasn't a home. It was a cage he'd built for himself. And Quincy recognized it immediately, because she'd spent her entire life watching powerful people pretend they weren't prisoners of their own making. March 25th, 6:47 a.m. Quincy was cleaning the main living area when Ryoo Ho-Seok walked through for his morning inspection. This was routine. He checked that everything was in place, that staff were invisible, that his world remained exactly as he'd designed it. He passed within 3 feet of her. Didn't look directly at her. Didn't acknowledge her presence beyond a slight nod to Mrs. Kang, confirming satisfactory work. To him, Quincy was furniture. But as he walked away, she noticed something no one else had bothered to see. His left hand tremored slightly when he reached for his briefcase. His jaw was clenched tight enough to see the muscle working. There were faint shadows under his eyes that expensive concealer almost, but not quite, covered. Ryoo Ho-Seok, the man who controlled an empire built on fear, was exhausted. And running from something he couldn't outmaneuver. Quincy returned to dusting the bookshelf, said nothing, filed the observation away. She'd learned long ago, powerful people reveal themselves in the smallest moments. You just had to pay attention. That was the day the clock started ticking. Neither of them knew it yet, but every interaction from that point forward would be a move in a game neither fully understood they were playing. He thought she was invisible. She knew visibility was a weapon, and she was choosing exactly when to use it. Would you take a job where silence was the first rule? Comment your answer. Over the next 2 weeks, Quincy moved through the penthouse like water through cracks, silent, inevitable, noticing everything. The coffee machine in the private kitchen ran at 3:17 a.m. every night. Not 3:00, not 3:30, exactly 3:17. She discovered this on her 4th night when she couldn't sleep, jet lag still pulling at her. She'd walked past the kitchen and heard it brewing, saw the timestamp on the security panel. The next morning, a single espresso cup sat in the sink, rinsed but not washed, as if he'd been interrupted mid-routine. She started tracking it. Every night, 3:17 a.m. The man who controlled Seoul's Underworld couldn't control his own sleep. By week 2, she documented more. The way he arranged his desk, pens parallel, files stacked by height, a specific geometry to everything. But there were inconsistencies. A book left open on page 247 for 3 straight days. The same page. As if he was reading the same passage over and over, searching for something that wasn't there. His vitamin bottles were full. Meals sent up from the private chef came back barely touched. The laundry she collected from his bedroom smelled like expensive cologne masking old sweat, the kind that came from stress, not exercise. No one visited, ever. Business associates came to his office downtown. The penthouse remained sterile, untouched by human warmth. Ryoo Ho-Seok was disappearing inside his own fortress. And Quincy began doing something dangerous. She started making adjustments. Small ones, invisible ones. His study had 17 books on the center shelf. He preferred them ordered by spine width, thickest to thinnest, but staff kept arranging them alphabetically. She fixed it, returned them to his preferred system without being asked. His tea, he drank green tea at 4:00 p.m., but the kitchen staff kept brewing it too hot, steeping it too long. She researched the optimal temperature for his specific blend, started preparing it herself, left it on his desk at 3:58 p.m. The first time, he'd stared at it for a full minute before taking a sip. She watched through the reflection in the hallway mirror. His expression shifted, just barely. Surprise, maybe, or suspicion. April 8th, 11:43 p.m. Ryoo Ho-Seok sat in his private security room, cycling through camera feeds. This was his nightly ritual, confirming his world remained under his command. He stopped on the kitchen feed, rewound, watched Quincy measuring water temperature with a thermometer, precise movements, controlled. She wasn't just making tea, she was solving a problem. He switched to the study feed from earlier that day, watched her reorganize his books. She'd pulled out her phone, photographed his preferred arrangement from a previous day, and replicated it exactly. She was studying him. In 15 years, no staff member had ever paid attention like this. They either feared him or wanted something from him. Fear made people careless. Ambition made people obvious. But Quincy Morrison moved through his space like she was reading a language no one else spoke. Quiet, efficient, eyes always down in the moment, but clearly seeing everything when no one was watching. He pulled up her file again. Standard background, nothing exceptional. Yet here she was, mapping his patterns with the precision of someone trained in surveillance. In his world, this meant two things: threat or ambition. He needed to know which. What Ryoo Ho-Seok didn't know, what he couldn't see from his wall of security feeds, was that Quincy had already spotted every camera in the penthouse, had calculated their blind spots, their angles. And she'd been performing for them the entire time. He thought he was watching her. She'd been directing what he saw from day one. April 12th, 2:30 p.m. The main hallway vase hadn't been moved in months according to the cleaning logs. A massive celadon piece worth more than Quincy's annual tuition. Mrs. Kang had finally authorized its cleaning. Quincy lifted it carefully, checked the base for maker's marks. That's when she saw it. Tucked behind the vase, pressed against the wall console, a silk handkerchief, cream-colored, monogrammed in silver thread, RHS, and stained with rust-brown marks that could only be one thing. Blood, old blood, years old by the oxidation pattern. She should have called Mrs. Kang immediately, should have left it untouched. That was protocol for anything unusual, anything personal. Instead, Quincy stood there, handkerchief in hand, reading the situation like she'd been trained to read streets back home. Where things were hidden told you as much as what was hidden. This wasn't tucked away carefully. It was placed. Behind a vase that never moved, yes, but visible to anyone who actually looked, almost like it was meant to be found eventually. A test, maybe, or a trap. She glanced up. Security camera in the corner, red light blinking. She was being recorded. Quincy made her decision in 3 seconds. She folded the handkerchief carefully and walked to the service laundry room, filled a basin with cold water and hydrogen peroxide, used a soft brush and worked the stains with the same precision she'd learned removing her brother's bloodied shirts after fights he never talked about. 20 minutes. The silk returned to pristine cream. She dried it with a hair dryer on low heat, pressed it with her palms, refolded it along the original creases. Then she walked back to the main hall and placed it exactly where she'd found it. She finished cleaning the vase, logged the task as complete, never mentioned the handkerchief to anyone. April 12th, 11:20 p.m. Ryoo Ho-Seok stood in the main hallway, staring at the space behind the vase. The handkerchief sat there, exactly where he'd left it 7 years ago, where it had remained untouched through dozens of staff rotations. Except now it was clean. He picked it up slowly. The monogram caught the light. His daughter's initials, not his. A gift she'd embroidered herself at age 6. The last thing he'd held of hers before they'd taken her body away. The blood was gone. He pulled out his phone, accessed the security footage, watched Quincy discover it, watched her pause, calculate, then carefully, methodically, restore it. She never flinched, never looked disturbed. just solve the problem in front of her with the same quiet precision she applied to everything else. And then she'd put it back. Not thrown away, not reported, not used as leverage. She'd simply acknowledged his ghost and chosen silence. Ryoo Ho-Seok's jaw tightened as his fingers traced the pristine silk. For the first time in years, someone had touched the thing he kept closest to his shattered heart. And somehow, that felt less like violation and more like recognition. He needed to know who Quincy Morrison really was. Because people who understood silence this well were either dangerous allies or perfectly placed threats. And he could no longer tell which. April 13th, 12:47 a.m. Quincy's phone buzzed on her nightstand, a text from an unknown number. My study, now. No signature, no explanation, but she knew exactly who it was. She pulled on a cardigan over her sleep clothes, slipped into shoes, and walked through the empty penthouse. The usual security detail was absent. The hallways felt different at night, larger, colder, like walking through a mausoleum. The study door was open. Ryoo Ho-Seok stood at the window, hands in his pockets, silhouetted against the Seoul skyline. He didn't turn when she entered. Close the door. She did. Silence stretched between them for 30 seconds. Finally, he spoke without turning around. Why didn't you report what you found? Quincy had prepared for this moment since she'd cleaned the handkerchief. She'd calculated the risks, knew this conversation was inevitable. She could have played innocent, pretended not to understand. That's what survival instinct screamed at her to do. Instead, she met his reflection in the window, looked directly at him, something no staff member had ever dared. Because, Mr. Ryoo, I understand that powerful men have battles the world doesn't see, and I'm not interested in your wars. I'm interested in doing my job. He turned then, actually looked at her. His expression was unreadable, that same controlled mask he wore during morning inspections, but his eyes were different, searching. You saw blood on a handkerchief in my home, and your first instinct was to clean it. My first instinct was to recognize grief, Quincy said quietly. I know what it looks like when someone holds onto the last piece of something they've lost. I wasn't going to take that from you. Something shifted in his posture. The rigid control loosened by a fraction. You could have used it. Leverage, blackmail. That's what people do in my world. I'm not from your world, Mr. Ryoo. No, he said slowly. You're not. He walked to his desk, pulled out a tablet, and handed it to her. On the screen, new assignments, access codes, clearances she shouldn't have. Starting tomorrow, you'll manage my private quarters, East Wing included. No supervision, no restrictions. Quincy looked at the tablet, then back at him. This was either trust or a trap, possibly both. You're giving me access to the one place staff are forbidden. I'm giving you access to the one place that matters. His voice was flat, but there was weight behind it. Everyone in my life wants something. Power, money, protection. You cleaned a blood-stained handkerchief and put it back. That tells me you either want nothing, or you're the best operative I've ever encountered. I'm a graduate student working to pay rent, Mr. Ryoo, not an operative. Then prove it. Do the job, keep your silence, and we'll never speak of this again. Quincy held his gaze for one more second, then nodded once. Understood. She turned to leave. Quincy. She stopped at the door. Thank you for the handkerchief. She didn't turn around, just nodded slightly and walked out. Behind her, Ryoo Ho-Seok stood alone in his study, holding the cleanest secret he'd ever kept, and wondering if he'd just made the smartest decision of his life, or the most dangerous. April 14th, 6:15 a.m. Mrs. Kang handed Quincy a key card without meeting her eyes. The older woman's disapproval was evident in the tightness of her jaw, but orders were orders. East Wing, Mr. Ryoo's private quarters. You'll work alone. Quincy took the card, felt its weight. This wasn't just access, it was a test she could still fail. The East Wing was separated from the main penthouse by a reinforced door that required both the key card and a fingerprint scan. Ho-Seok had updated her biometrics overnight. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Inside, the atmosphere changed completely. Where the main penthouse was cold and minimalist, the east wing felt frozen in time. Warm wood floors, soft lighting. Walls covered not with abstract modern art, but with paintings, watercolors of mountains, coastlines, a child's handprints in primary colors. And photographs, dozens of them. Quincy stood in front of the largest frame. A family. Ho-Seok, younger, his face unguarded in a way she couldn't imagine now. A woman beside him, elegant, laughing at something off camera. And between them, a little girl, maybe 6 years old, holding up a silk handkerchief she'd clearly just finished embroidering. The same handkerchief Quincy had cleaned. She moved through the rooms carefully. A child's bedroom, preserved perfectly. Art supplies still on the desk. A piano with sheet music open to a beginner's song. A woman's study with law books and case files from 2017. In Ho-Seok's private office, she found what she wasn't supposed to see. Financial records he'd asked her to file. Transaction logs, legal documents. She didn't want to look, but her eyes caught names, dates. June 23, 2017. Settlement payments to the Seoul Metropolitan Police. Funeral expenses. A property deed transfer, this penthouse, purchased 1 week after that date. And a newspaper clipping folded carefully in a leather journal. She shouldn't have opened it, but she did. Wife and daughter of a businessman killed in targeted attack. The article was brief, vague. Ongoing investigation into organized crime retaliation. No arrests, no justice. Just 2 bodies and a man who'd survived. Quincy's hands trembled as she closed the journal. She understood now. This wasn't a home. It was a tomb. Every perfect angle, every controlled space. It was a man building walls high enough that he'd never have to feel anything again. She'd seen it before. Her brother Marcus, after their father died. The way he'd shut down, channeled everything into the streets, into anger, into control he could never actually have. She'd watched him build his own fortress right up until the day a bullet found him outside a corner store. She'd cleaned his blood off the sidewalk herself. 11 years old, on her hands and knees, scrubbing while neighbors watched from windows. Grief didn't make you weak. It made you dangerous. To yourself most of all. Quincy stood in the center of Ryoo Ho-Seok's mausoleum and made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to let another man disappear inside his own pain. Not if she could help it. What she did next would either save him or destroy them both. April 17th, Quincy started small. She chose 1 photograph from the gallery, Ho-Seok and his daughter at a beach, both covered in sand, genuinely happy. She had it professionally cleaned and placed it on his nightstand in a simple silver frame. No note, no explanation. April 19th. She researched Korean flowers and their meanings, found that his daughter's room had dried purple asters in a vase, symbols of patience and elegance. She bought fresh ones and placed them in the East Wing hallway. April 21st. She moved the piano bench back to playing position, left the sheet music open. Small acts, quiet reminders that this space wasn't a tomb, it was a memorial, and memorials were meant to honor life, not bury it. April 22nd, 10:34 p.m., her door slammed open. Ryoo Ho-Seok stood in the doorway of her quarters, jaw clenched, eyes blazing with something between rage and panic. What gives you the right? Quincy stood slowly from her bed. She'd been expecting this. The right to what, Mr. Ryoo? To touch their things, too, his voice cracked slightly. To move them. I didn't move them. I honored them. You don't know anything about. I know you've turned their memory into a prison, Quincy said quietly, firmly. I know you're so afraid of forgetting them that you've forgotten yourself. His hands were shaking. She could see it even from across the room. You don't have to carry ghosts alone, Mr. Ryoo. I won't speak of them. I won't tell anyone. But I won't let you forget they made you human. The silence that followed felt like glass about to shatter. Then he turned and walked out, slammed the door behind him. Quincy sat back down, heart pounding. She'd crossed a line, probably just ended her employment, maybe worse. 63 minutes later, a soft knock. She opened the door. Ho-Seok stood there, the rage gone, replaced by something rower, more honest. What did you lose? It wasn't a demand. It was a genuine question. Quincy stepped aside. Let him in. They stood by her small window, rain beginning to streak the glass, Seoul's lights blurring into watercolor. My brother, Marcus, he was 17, got caught in crossfire outside a convenience store. Wrong place, wrong time. Her voice was steady, but quiet. I watched him try to control everything after our dad died. Watched him build walls, make himself untouchable. Told myself he was being strong. She paused, watching the rain. I was wrong. He was suffocating, and I didn't realize it until I was cleaning his blood off concrete. Ho-Seok was silent for a long moment. How old were you? 11. Another silence, rain hitting glass. Two people standing in darkness, not touching, but somehow connected by losses that had shaped everything they'd become. Her name was Jaiwoo, he finally said. My daughter, she was 6, loved the piano, couldn't play well yet, but she practiced every day. The handkerchief was hers. Yes. They stood there as the rain intensified. Two survivors recognizing something in each other that the rest of the world couldn't see. Finally, Ho-Seok spoke again, barely above a whisper. Don't stop. Whatever you're doing, don't stop. Then he left. And for the first time in 7 years, he went to the East Wing and played one note on his daughter's piano. Just one. But it was a beginning. April 26th, 3:15 p.m. Quincy was restocking supplies in the service pantry when the door closed behind her. She turned to find a man she'd seen only in passing, Min-jun, Ho-Seok's head of security. Mid-40s, military bearing, eyes that calculated threats for a living. Ms. Morrison, we need to talk. His English was precise. His tone was not a request. I haven't done anything wrong. That's debatable. He moved closer, not threatening, but imposing. Mr. Ryoo has changed since you arrived. He's distracted, emotional. These are liabilities in our world. Your world's not mine. You're in his home. You're in his world whether you accept it or not. Min-jun's expression hardened. He's not a man who heals, Ms. Morrison. He's a weapon, carefully calibrated, and you're making him weak. Or maybe he's been weak the entire time and just good at hiding it. Min-jun's jaw tightened. Here's what's going to happen. You'll maintain professional distance. No more photographs, no more flowers, no more personal interactions, or you'll accept a very generous severance package and disappear into Seoul's expat community. Quietly. He placed an envelope on the shelf beside her. Thick, heavy. 6-month salary, unconditional visa extension, references that will open any door in the city. He met her eyes. This is a kindness, Ms. Morrison. Take it. He left without waiting for an answer. Quincy stood alone in the pantry, staring at the envelope. She could open it, take the money, walk away from whatever this was becoming. She'd survived this long by knowing when to disappear. But something had shifted. She'd watched Ho-Seok play that single piano note in the East Wing, watched him start drinking his morning coffee in his daughter's study instead of his sterile office, watched the tension in his shoulders ease by fractions when she placed fresh asters in the hallway. He wasn't healing, not yet, but he was remembering how to be human. And Quincy knew what happened to people when the only person who saw them real walked away. She left the envelope unopened on the shelf. April 28th, 8:47 p.m., Quincy's phone buzzed. Would you join me for dinner? Not as staff. As company, you can say no. She stared at the message for a full minute. This was the line, the clear, undeniable line between professional and personal. She typed back, what time? Now. She found him in the East Wing dining room, a space she'd never seen used. The table was set for 2. Simple. No candles, no performance, just food and space. They sat across from each other. For the first 5 minutes, neither spoke. just ate in silence. But it wasn't awkward silence. It was the kind of quiet that existed between people who understood that words weren't always necessary. Finally, Ho-Seok set down his fork. Minjun spoke to you. He did. And you're still here. I am. Why? Quincy met his eyes. Because I've watched too many people disappear inside their pain, and I'm tired of walking away from people who just need someone to stay. Ho-Seok's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Recognition, gratitude, maybe even hope. This is dangerous ground, Quincy. I know. You should take his offer. I know that too. They finished dinner in silence, but it was the loudest, most honest conversation Ryoo Ho-Seok had had in 7 years. And both of them knew there was no going back now. Is she making a mistake, or is this the bravest thing she could do? Hit like if you'd stay, comment if you'd run. May 3rd, 11:23 p.m. The explosion shattered the western windows. Quincy was in the staff quarters when it happened. Glass and smoke, shouting in Korean, gunfire, sharp cracks that sent her straight back to childhood instincts. She found the younger maid, Jae-yoon, frozen in the hallway. Pulled her into a corner, shielded her with her own body, calculating exits while chaos erupted around them. Ho-Seok's security team neutralized the threat in 4 minutes. When he found Quincy, she was still covering Jae-yoon, calm, eyes scanning for secondary threats. Are you hurt? No. He pulled her into his study, locked the door. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but adrenaline and something darker. You should be terrified. Why aren't you? I grew up in neighborhoods where fear was a luxury. You think your world is darker than mine. You just have better suits. He grabbed her wrist, not violently, but desperately. Everyone who gets close to me dies. She didn't pull away. Then maybe you've been letting the wrong people close. The space between them evaporated. His eyes dropped to her lips. Her breath caught. They were a heartbeat from crossing the final line. He stopped, released her, stepped back. Leave while you still can. Quincy stayed exactly where she was. I'm not afraid of your demons, Ho-Seok. I'm afraid of wasting my life invisible. The walls he'd spent 7 years building cracked completely. And neither of them knew how to stop what came next. May 7th, Ho-Seok called her to his office, not the study, his actual office, the one where he conducted business that left bloodstains on silk handkerchiefs. I have a problem. Someone in my organization is feeding information to the Busan syndicate. Documents proving it are in Kim Tae-jin's estate. I need them. You have trained operatives. I have people Kim expects. Security will be tripled for his daughter's engagement party this weekend. But catering staff, he met her eyes. They're invisible. Quincy understood immediately. He was asking, not ordering, offering her a choice to step fully into his world. I'll do this, but not because you command it, because I choose to. And after this, you stop treating me like I'm breakable. He nodded slowly, agreed. May 9th, Quincy moved through Kim's estate in a catering uniform, carrying champagne trays, eyes cataloging security positions. She slipped into his private office during a toast, photographed the documents with a phone Ho-Seok provided, and was back serving appetizers 6 minutes later. Nobody noticed her. Nobody ever did. Except when she returned to the penthouse at midnight, Ho-Seok was waiting. Documents confirmed. Betrayal exposed. You're not just observant, he said quietly. You're capable. I've always been capable. You just finally saw it. He stepped closer. What do you want, Quincy? Name it, money, visa, freedom, anything. She held his gaze. What if I don't want freedom from you? What if I want freedom with you? The question hung between them like a blade. May 10th, 2:17 a.m. They sat in the East Wing in his daughter's study, where honest conversations seemed easier. I have accounts in Singapore, Zurich, Cayman Islands. Ho-Seok slid a folder across the desk. Enough for 3 lifetimes, new identity, any country you choose. You've given me more than anyone has in 7 years. Take this and disappear before my enemies use you against me. Quincy didn't open the folder. I don't want your money, Ho-Seok. I want honesty. Tell me, what do you want? The question clearly caught him off guard. He stared at her, then at his hands. No one's ever asked me that. I'm asking now. Silence stretched. Rain started against the windows, Seoul's familiar rhythm. I want, he struggled with words that had no place in his vocabulary. I want to stop being the architect, but I don't know who I am without the empire, without the control, without, his voice dropped, without the armor. Quincy reached across the desk, placed her hand over his. Then let's find out together, not as boss and maid, not as criminal and accomplice, as equals. His fingers tightened around hers. You don't know what you're asking for. I know exactly what I'm asking for. Someone real, not powerful, not perfect, just real. For the first time since his family died, Ryoo Ho-Seok allowed himself to want something beyond survival. He wanted her, and the life they might build from ashes. May 14th. Quincy never made it to the market. The van had no plates. Professional. Clean. By the time Ho-Seok realized she was gone, she'd been missing 4 hours. The message arrived at 6:00 p.m. A photo. Quincy, zip-tied to a chair, blood trickling from her temple. The text. Even the architect bleeds. Minjun had never seen Ho-Seok like this. The cold controls shattered into something primal. He made 12 calls, called in every debt, every favor, every threat he'd held in reserve for 7 years. Sir, if we move this aggressively. I don't care. You're about to burn the whole city for a maid. Ho-Seok's voice was ice. She's not a maid, and yes, I am. May 15th, 3:42 a.m. Ho-Seok found her in a warehouse in Incheon. 6 men neutralized. The rival operation dismantled with surgical precision that would send shockwaves through Seoul's underworld for months. When he cut her restraints, she was calm. Bruised, bleeding, but steady. You came. Of course I came. Not because you own me, she said quietly, touching his face with bound hands, but because you chose me. He pulled her close, shaking for the first time since his family died. I choose you, he whispered. I choose you over everything. In a burning warehouse, surrounded by the wreckage of his old life, Ryoo Ho-Seok finally understood what freedom meant. May 20th, Ho-Seok called a meeting with his inner circle. Minjun, his financial advisor, territory managers, he announced restructuring, delegation, transition of direct operations to trusted lieutenants. The room went silent. You're stepping back. Minjun's tone was carefully neutral. I'm creating distance. You'll handle day-to-day. I'll maintain strategic oversight. Nothing collapses. Nothing changes except my proximity. After they left, Minjun stayed. This is because of her. This is because I'm tired of building tombstones. Over the following weeks, Ho-Seok systematically dismantled his fortress. Not the empire, that would create dangerous vacuums, but his personal involvement in violence. He became the architect he'd always claimed to be, designing systems, not executing them. Quincy never asked for any of it, but her presence was a mirror he couldn't avoid. One night, reviewing a contract that involved intimidation tactics, she simply asked, "Is this who you want to be, or who you think you have to be?" He stared at the document for a long time, then signed a revised version, non-violent resolution. It cost more, took longer. But he slept better. I built this empire on graves, he admitted one night in the East Wing. You make me want to build something that breathes. She kissed him then, first time, soft and certain. Then let's build it together. June 2025. The company launched quietly. Ryoo Development Group, legitimate funding, transparent operations. Their focus, acquiring abandoned properties in Seoul's forgotten neighborhoods and converting them into community centers, youth programs, affordable housing. Quincy co-directed operations. She understood invisibility, knew exactly which communities were overlooked, which voices weren't heard. She hired locally. prioritized people the system had erased. Ho-Seok provided the infrastructure, the capital, the connections that could cut through bureaucratic barriers without crossing legal lines. The underworld noticed. Whispers spread. The architect has gone soft, weakened by a woman, losing his edge. Min-jun reported the chatter. Ho-Seok didn't flinch. Let them think what they want. I'm done proving myself through fear. But those closest knew the truth. He was more focused now, more dangerous because he was fighting for something beyond survival, for a future that wasn't built on ashes. September 2025. The East Wing had been transformed. His daughter's room remained, always would, but the rest became a library. Light, open, books on architecture, community development, second chances. They stood by the window one evening, watching Seoul's sunset. You saved me, Ho-Seok said quietly. Quincy shook her head. No, you chose to be saved. I just saw you were worth it. He pulled her close. For the first time in 8 years, the fortress felt like home. March 2026, 1 year after everything changed. The penthouse had transformed, warm colors on walls, Quincy's artwork, pieces from local artists she'd discovered, mixed with family photographs. Laughter echoed in hallways that once held only silence. She stood in the East Wing library, reviewing proposals for their 5th community center. No longer a maid, his partner. Equal stakeholder in Ryoo Development Group. Not because she'd earned his permission, but because she'd claimed her space, and he'd been wise enough to recognize her worth. Ho-Seok found her there, brought her tea, her preferred blend, prepared exactly how she liked it. You're smiling, she observed. I forgot I could. He'd thought he controlled everything. Wealth, fear, fate, built an empire on the belief that power meant never being vulnerable. But Quincy had shown him the one truth he couldn't architect his way around. Beneath the suits and scars, he was human, and that humanity wasn't weakness. It was the only power worth keeping. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For refusing to let me disappear. She kissed him. That's what you do for people worth saving. Outside, Seoul stretched infinite. Inside, 2 people who'd once been invisible to the world had finally seen each other. And built something real from ashes. Ryoo Ho-Seok was a man who built an empire on control. Until a maid named Quincy walked into his fortress and saw what no one else had, a man worth saving, if only he'd let her. She didn't fix him, she didn't complete him, she simply refused to let him disappear. And sometimes, that's the most powerful thing you can do for someone drowning in their own darkness. If this story gripped you, hit subscribe for more boss-made romances that challenge power dynamics. Comment which chapter hit hardest. I read every single one. And if you believe in love that transforms rather than destroys, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Next week, a billionaire CEO meets the night janitor who's been reading his confidential files. The secrets she knows could destroy him or set them both free. You won't want to miss it.